Story of French mental institution in 1900. Few creepy old photos are more disturbing than those captured inside the mental institutions of decades and centuries past. Seen here is one of countless patients being restrained in a French mental institution in 1900. It's unclear what condition this unfortunate patient suffered from. At the time, people could get committed for anything from depression and shell shock to schizophrenia and learning disabilities. With the abuses of patients like this one happening behind closed doors, we'll surely never know the extent of the trauma that these people suffered inside the institutions of old. The story of Exorcism of Annalisa Michel. Annalisa Michel was a devout Catholic teenager living a normal life with her parents in Germany in the late 1960s. But then she began blacking out at school before exhibiting increasingly strange behaviors like routinely convulsing, hallucinating, eating spiders, and even drinking her own urine. Michelle claimed to be possessed by the devil, and her parents soon came to the same conclusion. They ultimately subjected her to 67 exorcisms, none of which improved her condition before she died of malnutrition at age 23 in 1976, weighing just 68 pounds. Her story was so disturbing that it eventually inspired the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. The story of the expressionless face of a waxwork dummy. This expressionless waxwork dummy, flanked by two student nurses in training, was captured by photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones in 1968 for his book assignments. There's no ominous story behind this photo, but it's certainly one of the creepiest vintage pictures of the 20th century. Armstrong Jones, meanwhile, went on to have enormous personal and professional success. His photography captured the imagination of millions, while he himself captured the heart of Princess Margaret and became the first Earl of Snowdon after they married in 1960. The story of tragedy by the sea. On the morning of April 2, 1954, Los Angeles Times photographer John Gaunt was lounging in the front yard of his beachfront home in Hermosa Beach when he heard a neighbor shout, "Something's happening on the beach." Instinctively, Gaunt grabbed his camera and rushed over to see a horrified couple clutching each other. On the shore, with high, crashing surf as a backdrop, stood a young couple, Mr. and Mrs. John MacDonald. As they moved forward, then back, clinging to one another, their body language told Gaunt a story that tightened his stomach. He realized that someone must be lost, and he took a photograph from 200 feet away. Only then did he learn that just moments before, the couple's 19-month-old son, Michael, had been playing along the shoreline. The photograph, entitled "Tragedy by the Sea," appeared on the front page of the Times the next day. The image won the 1955 Pulitzer Prize for Press Photography. The Pulitzer Committee called the photo poignant and profoundly moving. Story of the spirit photography. William Mumler was originally an engraver in Boston who treated photography as a side hobby. After developing a self-portrait and discovering a surprise girl made of light in the final print, he became one of the first spirit photographers, someone whose principal goal is to capture ghosts and spirits in photographs. The title earned him both acclaim and scorn from the spiritualist community. Though many accused him of fraud, no one was able to debunk his methods. This picture of the supposed ghost of Abraham Lincoln with his widow, Mary Lincoln, was taken in circa 1870. It is considered one of the first examples of spirit photography. The story behind Woolworth sit-in. The humiliating and fury-inducing moment was frozen in time on May 28, 1963, by Fred Blackwell, a photographer for Jackson Daily News. From left to right, at the white-only counter at a Woolworth's 5 and dime store in Jackson, sits three protesters: John Salter, a sociology teacher, and students Joan Trumporan and Moody. All three were from Tougaloo College, a black college, which became the core of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. While sitting at the counter, the party was assaulted by an angry white mob, who were pouring ketchup, mustard, and sugar on John, Joan, and Anne. Heartbreaking story behind childhood friends. Taken by Jacques Gourmelin, the photograph became one of the iconic pictures from the people of Brittany, France. On April 6, 1972, in Saint Brieuc, workers from the company Joint Française went on strike, and CRS, French riot police, intervened. In the photo, face-to-face stand two men, Guy Bermoux, a worker, and Jean-Yvan Antinac, a riot policeman. As it turned out, the two had been childhood friends and recognized each other. The photographer later recalled, "I saw him, Guy Bermooks, go toward his friend and grab him by the collar. He wept with rage and told him, 'Go ahead and hit me while you're at it.' The other one didn't move a muscle." Story behind Burst of Joy photograph. Burst of Joy is another Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph. It was taken by Associated Press photographer Slava Solvetter, taken on March 17, 1973 at Travis Air Force Base in California. The image depicts United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Sturm reuniting with his family after spending more than 5 years in captivity as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. The centerpiece of the photograph is Robert's 15-year-old daughter Lori, who's seen with outstretched arms and a huge smile on her face while running up to her dad. "You could feel the energy and the raw emotion in the air," the photographer recalls. The photograph went on to become a symbol of the end of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. Story behind Therese Kaskral's photograph. This haunting and eerie photograph was taken by David Seymour, one of the founders of Magnum Photos and one of the leading photojournalists of the 20th century, in a home for emotionally disturbed children located in Warsaw, 1948. The assignment at the center that day was to draw a home on the blackboard. While other kids drew houses, Tereska, who grew up in a concentration camp, had a different idea of home. One can only wonder what the scribble depicts, but it seems as if the pain and the horrors endured on the camp is clearly seen in the piercing glare of Tereska.
The story of the youngest's mother. When she was just 5 years old, Lena Medina, born on the 23rd of September, 1933, was brought by her parents to a hospital who complained of extreme abdominal growth. After being examined by a doctor, a shocking truth was discovered: Lena was 7 months pregnant. Apparently, Lena was born with a rare condition called precocious puberty, which, simply put, is the early onset of sexual development. Lena Medina then officially became the youngest documented mother in medical history. She gave birth to a boy on the 14th of May, 1939, by a cesarean section, as her pelvis was too small. The child born was completely healthy and was named Gerardo. However, the father of the child remained a mystery.
The story of the two brothers after lightning. This seemingly fun and lively photo of two brothers, Michael and Sean McQuilkin, was taken at Morro Rock in California's Sequoia National Park on August 20, 1975. The photograph was captured by their sister Mary just seconds before they were struck by lightning. One of the brothers later recalled, "At the time, we thought this was humorous. I took a photo of Mary and Mary took a photo of Sean and me. I raised my right hand into the air, and the ring I had on began to buzz so loudly that everyone could hear it. I found myself on the ground with the others. Sean was collapsed and huddled on his knees. Smoke was pouring from his back. At the time, all the three survived, but Sean, the younger brother, sadly took his own life in 1989. Story behind 1964 Monson Motor Lodge protests. The famous photograph, perfectly conveying the shaky times of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, was taken by Horace Court. The image shows a group of white and black young people swimming in the pool of a Monson Motor Lodge motel on June 18, 1964, while the manager of the motel is pouring bleach on them. 7 days prior to the incident, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested for trespassing at the same Monson Motor Lodge after being asked to leave from its segregated restaurant. A group of protesters decided to fight back peacefully and decided to plan a swim-in in the pool designated for whites only as a form of protest. Whites, who paid for their rooms in the motel, invited black people to join them in the motel pool as their guests. Then, the motel manager, Jimmy Brock, in an effort to break up the party, poured a bottle of muriatic acid into the pool in order to scare the swimmers so that they would leave. Story of an Armenian man dancing. Antoine Gauguin is a legendary French photographer of Armenian descent. Here's Antoine's story on capturing this striking image. In 1998, I found myself in Apirin, a large town an hour's drive from Armenia's capital, Yerevan. A local dance troupe was performing that evening. As soon as I took my first shot, an old man approached me. Tears streamed down his face. He told me that his son had died, that he had been electrocuted, that he was his pride and joy, and that I looked just like him. He broke into sobs and moved towards me with outstretched arms. I asked if he would dance for me, and he began dancing. The troop paused and perched on an outcrop of rocks in the background. It was beautiful, not because the man is beautiful, but because he represents something deep inside the collective consciousness of the Armenian community, a celebratory resilience in the face of overwhelming loss. Story of atomic bomb detonation picture. Harold Edgerton, an MIT physicist and a photographer, is best known for his invention of strobe light photography, allowing us to freeze fast actions in time, as in the famous picture of a bullet piercing an apple. In the beginning of 1947, Harold's research firm was commissioned to photograph atomic bomb tests in Nevada and the Pacific. This particular photograph was taken on June 5, 1952, as part of Operation Tumbler Snapper test series at the Nevada Proving Grounds with a shutter speed of 100 millionth of a second. The story of Pioneer's Defense. Known as the Pioneer's Defense, this creepy historical image was captured in 1937 by Russian photographer Viktor Bulla. While certainly an ominous sight, the men, women, and children depicted here were merely members of the Young Pioneers, the Soviet youth group that was akin to the Boy Scouts. They're seen here donning gas masks during a military preparation drill in the Leningrad area, uncertain of what tomorrow might bring in the years just before World War II, while their home country was seeing waves of death and terror under dictator Joseph Stalin.